I want to thank our sponsor, Newmark Watch Company, who are a British-owned brand who create some stunning timepieces such as their classic 6BB, the 52 Field, the 71 Sports, and my current favourite, the 6BB MP Professional Panda. They are also launching a new model in the next few months in an ultra-limited run, with the pre-order details coming very soon, and you can find out first by following them on their social media pages linked in the description below, and also signing up to their mailing list via their website, newmarkwatchcompany.com. Thank you and enjoy. Dave, when did you become interested in aviation?
I became interested from an early stage. Mike, my father was in the Air Force and did his national service in the 1950s. A friend of his was flying Meteors at the time in 43 Squadron at RAF Lookers, and he had a couple of trips in Meteors and told me about them. And that got me going, and I was an enthusiast. I never really thought about joining the Air Force until I finished my degree, and then I just turned into the RAF Careers Office, said, I want to fly one of those. And I said, okay, sit down, there's a few more hoops to jump through before then.
Yeah. So what year did you join the RAF, and can you talk us through some of the aircraft you started training on before the front line?
Yeah, I joined the RAF in late 1989. Whilst I was at officer training, the Berlin Wall came down, which changed things a bit. And I went straight out of officer training into navigator training, and that was on the Domini T Mark 1.
Mighty Domini.
Mighty Domini. And also the Jet Provost 5, the one with the tip tanks.
So did you know what aircraft you actually wanted to go on to though after this?
Yeah, as I went through training, I was really keen to go on to the Buccaneer.
Oh, okay.
That was kind of like top tariff at the time, so aim high. But by the time we were finishing our training and getting posted to aircraft, the Buccaneer and the Phantom were both in drawdown, so they weren't taking ab initio navigators or ab initio pilots at that time. So it was Tornado or Tornado. And we had a great course commander initially, Simon Broadway. And he was an F4 guy, and he got us into air defence, and so keen to go to the F3 at that stage.
Good stuff. So yeah, let's talk about the F3. What were your first thoughts on the aircraft?
First thoughts were that it was quick. I mean, massively different to anything else you'd flown. First sortie, kick in the backside, brain, in a piece of string behind the aircraft as you fly down the runway, and also. At the time, the F3 was going through a pretty difficult time in terms of radar development, but I thought the radar was pretty good. It did the job. The first radar I touched was a Z-less radar, and quickly after that was a stage 1 radar, and they did the job for a basic interceptor at that stage.
So yeah, can you just talk a bit about the role of the aircraft? Because it wasn't a dogfighter, was it? It was strictly an interceptor, is that correct?
Yeah, it was built as an interceptor. Obviously, you start off with a platform of the Tornado bomber and try to turn it into an interceptor, and this is what you get in the F3. But the role was full air defence, so we did have to learn air combat manoeuvre techniques. We did have to learn big BVR techniques against capable adversaries. But the basic role and the most important role the RAF does is the defence of the UK. And so that quick reaction alert role, when I joined, the F3 was carried out by F3s at Lookers and at Coningsby.
So let's get into your ground training. How did you get used to the complex systems in this aircraft?
Well, they had about 4 weeks worth of ground school where you learned about all the systems, and so you're learning about the hydraulics, engines, all the systems that make the aircraft go, but you're also learning about the weapons system as well. There's lots of hands-on stuff on the ground. You can control the navigation system, turn it on. There was always a little bit of a play around to get the navigation system aligned. These days it just start the aircraft, the navigation system's ready, but you had to go through a fairly complex sequence to get the navigation system going. And we learned on a mission simulator, where the student pilot and the student nav sat in the mission simulator, and we went through a series of emergencies, and they basically tested us on all of the emergencies on the aircraft. So, and the pilot got to, used to moving the stick and the wings in the right way at the same time as well. The other thing that was on the ground was a thing called the Tornado Air Intercept Trainer, the TATE, and it was basically a pilot cockpit, a navigator cockpit, and an instructor console in between, and the instructor could set up intercepts. And so the pilot flew it through, and the navigator found the targets, and it was a really good way to get all of the procedures sorted out, get the muscle memory from operating the radar, get the muscle memory for speaking to the pilot speaking to you, and speaking to other aircraft as well.
And can you remember your first flight, and was it with like an experienced pilot?
Yeah, my first flight was with a squadron leader, who's one of the flight commanders on the OCU. The OCU started as 229 OCU, but I think it was 56 Squadron changed to 56 Squadron whilst I was on the squadron. And we actually hadn't finished the ground school fully.
Okay.
And he had just been posted down from RAF Lookers, and he was wanting to go back to RAF Lookers for the weekend. Those were the days. And so he took an aircraft to RAF Lookers for the weekend, couldn't find any staff to go with him, so I put my hand up and off I went. So I got 2 for the price of 1, up to Lookers, weekend at home, and then back down on the Monday.
And could you tell the power difference coming from the Hawk when the reheats kicked in?
Yeah, huge difference. I mean, one of the things that I was expecting to do on my first trip, because it was, it was on the tick box list, was low level acceleration.
Yeah.
And so the aircraft went from 250 knots to 750 knots in something like 30 seconds. And at the peak acceleration, it was 30 knots a second. Wow. So better than 0 to 60 in 2 seconds in a car, but it's just going on and on and on, pushing it back into your seat. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so how long was your training, and what was your first frontline squadron?
So overall navigator training was 2 years. I did 18 months at Finningley, and then 6 months at Brodie, which was like fast jet lead-in. It wasn't a formal course. It was just get some time in the back of a Hawk, going from 300 knots to 450 knots sort of thing. So that was good. And then onto the F3 for 6 months on the OCU. So it's probably just shy of 3 years from the start of officer training when I actually went to the front line.
I can imagine it's a lot longer now for
it is. Yeah, and throughout my time, in the Air Force, the training times ebbed and flowed. Some people took 6 years to go through training.
Wow. So was it 43 your first squadron?
43 was my first squadron.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. And was that your first choice?
It was my first choice. When I was at the OCU, I did say I wanted to go to 43 Squadron. I was panicking about being posted to Coningsby, personal opinion. And I actually, RAF in those times wasn't really that caring and sharing on the personnel front, and it was kind of like, you'll get what you're given and be thankful.
Yeah.
But I phoned up RAF Innsworth, who made all of the decisions, and said, I really want to go to 43 Squadron. And the guy on the other end of the phone, my squadron leader poster, he said, great, there might be some slots coming up there, Dave, I'll bear it in mind. Thanks for the call. 2 minutes later, 56 Squadron Tannoy goes off. Flying Officer Gourlay, get to the flight commander's office and think, what's this about? And I walked into the flight commander's office there, WTF? Why on earth are you calling the poster? Nobody should be calling the poster. So I got a mild bollocking for that. But there's no such thing as bad publicity. Exactly. And I managed to get posted to 43 Squadron.
Yeah. So what kind of flying would you be conducting on 43?
Well, as I said, the key role, or the most important role, was quick reaction alert. And so when you joined the squadron, your convex, your conversion to squadron life and being combat ready, started off by being limited combat ready for QRA, which I found really exciting in terms of, here I am, I'm going to be operational, I'm going to sit in the Q shed, I might get a call, and of course, the stark reality is you sit in the Q shed on the first day 10 minutes later you're going, this is a bit boring. But other things we did concentrated really on defensive counter-air when you joined the squadron. Setting up combat air patrols, defending an area, defending a piece of real estate, defending some aircraft in the sky, AWACS, for example, high value assets. And then you would progress on to offensive counter-air, where you're at the front of a package or close escort with a package right beside them, protecting them as they penetrate deep to make an attack. And so that was kind of the progression. And we also progressed from being a pairs lead initially to 4-ship lead as you went through your first tour, and then go on to 6 and 8-ship leads as you got more experienced.
And my favourite subject is DACT on this channel. Did you manage to do DACT when you got 43?
Yeah, we did a reasonable amount of DACT on 43. We had to do DACT as part of the convex. So I went with 3 other combat ready guys in a pair, and we flew out to Beauvais in Belgium, right beside Leuven, where they make Stella Artois. And just so happens. And we flew against F-16s for a week. So mainly 2v2 against the Belgian F-16s.
How did you fare against those guys?
Good and bad. good and bad. You know, if you in an F3, if you find yourself in a kind of 1v1 situation against an F-16, even Stevens, it's you know, it's top trumps at that time, and he's got the 9G aircraft. But it's not always about that. It's, you know, sight is life. And so if you go in with better situational awareness into a merge, you can beat any aircraft if he doesn't have that same situational awareness. We played a couple of tricks on the F-16s. So we did a bit of radar to visual merging, and one trick we played on them was to make our nose point well away from them. And so as they came to us, they had the controller telling them where we were. They found them on their radar, which wasn't a great pickup range on their radar, but they found us and they saw us pointing away from them. And they thought, they haven't seen us. So they just kept on coming straight towards us. They had Fox 2s or Sidewinders. We had Skyflash and Sidewinders. And just at about 10 miles, we snapped directly onto them because we were holding them right on the edge of our radar to make it look as if we hadn't seen them. Snapped in, took some shots, and they had to go immediately defensive against the Skyflash. And by doing that, we ended up, you know, in a 90-degree advantage as we hit the merge. So that's the sort of thing we might play around at in the DACT.
Do you do any tricks? I heard like the F-14 guys used to sweep the wings, so it looks like they were coming in faster. Did the F-3 ever do that?
It has been known, because of course the wings were completely manual. In the F-3 there was an automatic mode which was never cleared by the Air Force for use. So I have seen a situation where somebody comes to the merge with wings in a back position to try and give the wrong impression of what sort of speed they're doing.
And you've flown on many large exercises. Can you tell us about this and your thoughts of flying the F-3 on these exercises?
Yeah, first exercise flew on in 43, things like Cope Thunder in Alaska. Wasn't a huge exercise, but you know, as F-3s with Skyflash, we were kind of like the aggressors almost, because we had a semi-active missile, and the American aircraft we were flying against were, you know, spammed up with AMRAAM, and so, you know, they're wanting to fight against somebody who's simulating the enemy with their semi-active missiles, and we found ourselves fighting against people with fully active missiles, which at the time wasn't representative of how the Russians or any other adversary might fight. They didn't have active missiles at that time. So that was it was kind of an interesting, it was almost negative training, but you know, doing things like that really built up your capacity, really built up your situational awareness, because you had to work so hard to confuse the enemy and to do some crazy stuff whilst you're flying, lots of height changes, lots of angle changes to try and defeat their situational awareness. But whilst you're doing that, it's really difficult to keep up your own situational awareness. Your radar might not be pointing at them all the time. So when you come back hot to a threat, you've really got to find them quickly and carry on from where you were. So it was a big capacity builder. And the biggest exercise flew on was red flag, of course. I did 2 red flags in the 1990s. They were great exercises.
And that was on 43?
I did both my red flags on Treble One, actually.
Yeah.
I never went to red flag on 43. Yeah. Coke Thunder, which became red flag Alaska, but we went to red flag twice with Treble One.
We will get into that a bit later on. But so your first large exercise, how did the Americans see the F3 and the RAF in general when you went over there?
Well, as I say, kind of treated us almost as aggressors. And when we did well, we did really well. And the aircraft is really good with a 2-man crew in maybe poor weather or at night. We used to do much better at night on a big exercise because being a 9G jet, it doesn't really help you at night when you're not actually looking directly at the threat. So that was a real, brought parity, really, especially when we had AMRAAM and ASRAAM in the 2000s.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned it, the F3 did quite well at night, and I was surprised about that.
Yeah, and again, there's no dogfighting at night. You've got 2 people in the cockpit, so your situational awareness might be better than a single seat person operating at night. And we tend to find that we did better at night on those big exercises. Certainly better in bad weather.
What was the social side like on our first exercise in Alaska?
In Alaska, it was great. We spent a lot of time, going out Denali National Park.
Yeah.
There was some great eateries and pubs and whatnot in Alaska. And of course, red flag was different. You can come on to that later.
Yeah, we will.
Casinos were the order of the day there.
Yeah. So would you mingle with the other air forces, or would you stick RAF on the social side at that first exercise?
You definitely mingle, so they'd have meet and greets,
okay,
and kind of joint happy hours, and the end of a week's flying, you'd certainly everybody would get together in the bar.
Good stuff. But you also flew in Bosnia. Can you tell us about this? And did you feel ready?
Yes. So that was in 1994. It was Operation Deny Flight. So it was a UN operation. F3s were operating out of Gioia del Colle in Italy, and flying across the Adriatic and into the Bosnian no-fly zone to enforce it. In terms of the question, did I feel ready? Absolutely, we felt ready. We spent probably 4 months specifically looking at the challenge of flying over Bosnia. So we're looking at the threat. It wasn't a great deal of a threat from a fixed wing perspective. They had Arreos, which were like a Jaguar, so pretty low performance, even lower than the F3, which is good news. And Jastrebs, which are effectively just like a jet Provost. So there wasn't much going on there. There was a lot of helicopter movement going on over Bosnia, and that's really what we were there to try and stop. So we did a lot of helicopter affiliation. Flying against the helicopters, trying to bring the weapons to bear against the helicopters. The Fox one, the Skyflash, unlikely that you're going to get a shot against a helicopter in the Skyflash. It's not impossible, but unlikely in the scenarios we were talking about. But with a Sidewinder, Fox 2, good opportunity there. And also we used the gun for air-to-ground strafing effectively. And so we would practice trying to target the helicopters at low level when we're at home against RAF helicopters, target them with a dive, a sort of a 20 or 30 degree strafing dive with the gun.
Was the gun quite accurate then? Did you ever get to live firings?
Yeah, gun was super accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was an air-to-ground mode, which used the radar to get the solution, and it was in fairly level ground or even ground, should I say. It gave really good accuracy, air to ground. And then when you were in the air, if you locked the target, it was a Pipper death dot. If you put that on the target and pull the trigger at the right range, you're going to hit it.
Mm-hmm. And how often would you be flying over there? Would it be daily, or was it?
Yeah, so it was daily, about 4 or 5 hours per mission. Mm-hmm. So we would take off from Gioia, go over the Adriatic, refuel at that point, do some check-ins with the US Navy. Had a ship in halfway across the Adriatic. We'd do some check-ins, make sure things like our IFF were working, and we had good comms before we went down the tubes. So corridors into the no-fly zone, down the tubes, patrol the no-fly zone as directed by AWACS, and then come out, refuel, back in again. So probably do about 3 refueling brackets through the mission. Worst scenario was that as you got to the end of your mission, they would tell you that the next pair from a different air force weren't able to take up their option, and that you might have to stay in the air for another 3 hours. Oh, no. And so I've certainly done that before. The other thing we trained for in Bosnia was the ground threat, and as far as I remember, the biggest threat was the SA-6 Russian missile, which was mobile as well. So although I think it was usually up in Banja Luka, they could move it around. And it was the same SA-6 that finally brought down Scott O'Grady from his F-16 the year after we were there in 1995. So we were very keen on that threat. In the F-3, we had a very good radar homing warning receiver, RHWR. And it was a world-class piece of kit. So it was better than anything else they had in the Air Force, better than the one in the GR1, because it had interferometers at the front in the wing nibs, so you had better accuracy in the front. And the second year that the F-3 was going out to deny flight was 1995. By that time, because of the SA-6, they had introduced the towed radar decoy to the F-3. And again, it was world class. Nobody else had a towed radar decoy. They were definitely bringing it into Navy F-18s at the time, but we were the first with a towed radar decoy. And it was a Harrier Zeus ECM pod or ECM techniques generator that fired the details down a piece of fiber optic to the towed radar decoy a couple of 100 meters behind you. Mm-hmm. And so if you're flying against something like an SA-6 and you try to jam it from your aircraft, it might have a home-on jam. Mm-hmm. And you might be turning your aircraft into a beacon. So why not have that beacon 200 meters behind your aircraft? And it wasn't quite as simple as that. There were certain maneuvers you had to do to make it effective, but it was world class at the time.
Dave, do you have any memorable stories from your time on 43?
Yeah, plenty of good memories. One in particular, I remember firing first weapon whilst I was on 43 Squadron. So that was a Skyflash missile. And the squadron would go every year on missile practice camp, MPC, and you'd fly a few aircraft down to RAF Valley, and you'd fire maybe a mixture of Sidewinders and Skyflash in the Aberporth Ranges, so Cardigan Bay effectively, west of Wales. And it was always a very canned setup. And the aircraft at 350 knots, it'd be a 10-mile shot somewhere around there, nothing too fancy. And the whole idea was, give you that experience for the pilot, that the pilot pull the trigger, but for both of you, how does that rocket feel to come off the aircraft? Because with Skyflash, there's a bit of a delay. Mm-hmm. As the information's passed to the missile gets a bit of an alignment in its systems, knows which way is up type thing. So it's a second and a half, something like that, before it's off and running. And also firing a Sidewinder off of the wings. It's the Sidewinder supersonic before it leaves the end of the wings. So there's a big bang beside you as a missile leaves the aircraft. So really important to get that feeling. Training missions, you're pulling the trigger 10 times on a training mission, but that a rocket's never coming off. So it's really important to get that feeling.
Yeah, so what was it like? So could you actually feel that coming off on that first firing, and were you excited about it as well? Because I couldn't wait, I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Yeah, we're definitely excited about it. The missile was recessed into the base of the aircraft, and so there was these big launchers, two big sort of upside, N shapes, pushing the missile off, Fraser Nash launchers, and there was a big clunk in your seat when those launchers pushed the missile away, and then you heard the whoosh of the missile, because of course the rocket motor doesn't start up until the missile's been pushed away from the aircraft. Then you hear the whoosh, and off it goes. And that first missile, I said it was canned. It was a little bit more interesting, this one, I think, because it was a shot with 15,000 feet of look down. So the Jindevik was like about the same size as a Jet Provost again, but a remotely piloted vehicle. That was the target, or at least it was towing a target, which is a big radar reflector about 200 meters behind it, just like towed radar decoy. You don't want to shoot down the Jindevik. You want to shoot down the target behind the Jindevik. And so we went head to head with it, 15,000 foot for us, low level for the Jindevik, and it was a 10-mile shot. So the radar had a bit of depression to start with, and then once we fired, we went diving after the missile to check out what had actually happened to it. And it was very procedural, but it was tense. It's kind of like, let's not screw this up. Yeah. Let's not make any switch pigs, do something wrong here. So as we got to the range for firing was 10 miles, and I remember getting to 10 miles and expecting to hear our call sign and you're clear to fire. And all I heard was the controller saying 10 miles. It was like big thinks bubble. I was just like, call sign was India, remember it? Confirm India, clear to fire? Oh yeah, you're clear to fire now. And you couldn't fire unless you'd actually been told you're clear to fire. And you're firing a live missile. There are no ships around. They made sure everything's clear, and you've got to press the transmit button for the firing 3 times, so that they have an opportunity to stop you as you're firing, and also cue the trackers for the missile. So you transmit firing, now, and then the rocket would go off.
Brilliant stuff. So who actually gets the button switched and say, like, right, who fires it? Is it back or front?
It's front seat.
Right, okay.
And always the front seat.
Okay.
In the F3 for all the weapons. So now the requirement was for the navigator to lock the target, make sure we've got a good lock on the target. The front seater pulls the trigger, and then part of the radar then switches over to continuous illumination. So it's sending a continuous wave down through the lock position, and that's bouncing off the target, and the missile sees that, goes after it.
Yeah. So what was it like when you landed after that first firing?
Just relief.
Relief. Yeah, it went well.
Somebody's going to screw up this week. It's not me.
Yeah. Thank God.
So
How long did you spend on 43?
That was 3 years for my first tour, and then I was posted. It was quite tense, actually. There weren't many second tours for F3s going around at that time. But I picked up a second tour on Treble One Squadron, so just crossed the runway to Treble One.
So we're going to get stuck into that. How did you feel about going over the road, as it were?
Well, the best squadron at Lookers changed from 43 to Treble One at that point. There was always a bit of banter between the two squadrons, but you knew everybody on both squadrons. So when you went across, it was there was no surprises, and everybody was following the same standard operating procedures. So there was an F3 force standard operating procedure, so everything should be the same, but each squadron has its small changes, and the way they operate on the line day to day, and how they do the engineering as well is usually slightly different. So you just had to bed in to the new squadron.
And would you mix with like the other squadron, or was it like separate again?
Yeah, socially you mix with the other squadron. Normal squadron stuff, you had dining in nights for the squadron, but you also had station dining in nights where you'd get together socially with people, and everybody was always in the bar for happy hour on a Friday.
Would you swap jets as well? If one of yours broke, would you go over there and say, like, we
Yeah,
all make one of yours?
there was always drug deals going on to get jets swapped around, and I think you owe us one, don't you? So let's have one. And when I was in 56 Squadron later, we had a lot of twin stickers on 56 Squadron, probably about half of the 20 aircraft, and the frontline squadrons, 43 and Treble One. They had one twin sticker, maybe between the two of them, so they would borrow twin stickers from us. There was definitely a bit of swapping going on.
And would they actually use the twin stickers for anything?
Yeah, so pilot training. And on the squadron, on an annual basis, check rides. So pilots would do a dual check, which is kind of general sort of handling, but they'd also do an instrument rating test every year, and you would need the twin sticker for that, because a pilot in the back seat who was an instrument rating examiner or a QFI.
So then, I'm guessing you have another memorable story from finding Skyflash again, but this was supersonic, wasn't it? Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, that was in Treble One.
Yeah.
It was a great day out, and I led it with a good friend, so that was quite nice to be able to lead a sortie like that.
Good memory.
Yeah, it was definitely different from any other NPC sortie that I did in my time. I maybe fired 4 or 5 missiles over my years. It was supersonic firing, so the conditions were F3 at Mach 1.4, and the target, which was a stiletto, Shorts SD2 stiletto, supersonic target, that was at Mach 1.6. So Mach 3 at the point of trigger, trigger pull. And of course, you can't do that in Aberporth Ranges off Wales. There's not enough room. So we had to do it as a high seas firing, they called it, and that was between the Shetland Islands and the Faroe Islands. So in order to, I'll run through who was there. 6 F3s, 4 of them armed. There was an VC-10 to refuel us, because we couldn't carry tanks because we needed to fly at Mach 1.4 at the point of firing. So that was beyond the tank limiting speed. So we didn't have any tanks. We needed that tanker, that's for sure. And then there was the Canberra from RAF Embedder. That was a BTT2. Raspberry Ripple, from yellow, red, white, and blue, I think, from Embedder. And it was carrying 2 short stiletto supersonic targets. So we got, out of those 6 aircraft, 2 of the aircraft were going to get to fire that day. And then it was a Nimrod MR2 as well. And the purpose of the Nimrod MR2, we never spoke to it on the mission, but the purpose there was to clear the sea and make sure there are no ships in the way for when trigger was pulled. And also they could provide some sort of search and rescue if one of the F3s ended up down between the Faroes and the Shetlands, which is quite a long way from a pickup. There was one other element to that firing which was really interesting, and that was that it was a cooperative firing. So one of the real limitations of the Skyflash was that it's semi-active. So you had the firing aircraft had to support the aircraft all the way to the point of impact. You're illuminating it, as I said, from the radar. And that meant, so as soon as you fired a missile at somebody and you had the advantage, you would maneuver the nose away from that other aircraft and hold that person on the radar, and that would kind of reduce the closure. But you never get away from merging with that aircraft. It was just a few miles when the missile impacted, so you couldn't just turn tail and run. You had to point in at that point. So you're always committed to a merge. If you get an AMRAAM, you can actually turn away from the person you're shooting at once that missile goes active. So the idea here with the cooperative firing was that you would have an F3 up front doing the firing, and you'd have another F3 20 miles behind. And it would also illuminate the target with its radar, and the front F3 could then peel away, just as if you'd fired an AMRAAM that's active straight away and turn around. So it gave you an advantage, and it was an advantage that was potentially needed because there were Russian missiles that were bigger than the Skyflash, or longer range than the Skyflash. So it was quite a complicated setup, and it was down to us, myself and my friend, in the cockpit leading it, to sort it all out. We started off by taking off from Lookers and joining with the tanker over the top of Lossiemouth, somewhere around there. And everyone in the formation had to see how well their radar performed against the VC-10.
Okay.
So when did you get the VC-10 contact? When could you lock the radar to the VC-10? What range? When could you turn on the missile illumination and the radar still retain lock? Because the radar took about half its power to do the missile illumination. And so everybody was reporting this to us on the radio that we kept for interformation chat. And they had to report, and I wrote it all down. And of course, they didn't say anything in the clear. We had a base number, 50 or whatever, and they'd give you 3 numbers: base plus 10, base plus 5, base minus 5, for the lock, the contact, the lock, and then the illumination. So I had all of this information in a matrix in front of me going, right, who's going to fire first? Surprisingly enough, we decided we'd fire first.
Right.
I mean, there might have been a better scenario, but we were in charge, so we thought we're firing first. And it worked like clockwork. There was a little bit of jiggery-pokery to be done, which was if you left the radar on in the firing aircraft, just after firing, then the missile would see your radar and ignore the radar behind. So you had to turn off the radar or stop the radar from transmitting sometime between trigger press and about a second after the eject.
Oh, right, okay.
So the timing wasn't that difficult, but it had to be done, otherwise the missile definitely wasn't going to work. So it was an unusual setup.
And were you a fan of the Skyflash? Was it a good missile, would you say?
I was a fan of Skyflash because I fired a few.
Yeah, you have to be, don't you?
Enjoyed firing a few. It had a really good seeker for a semi-active missile. It got ahead of it was based upon US missile, and it was ahead of that in terms of its time for the seeker. But then the actual motor itself was a little bit disappointing. So the range of the Skyflash wasn't brilliant. When we were actually firing on the supersonic 1.4 against a 1.6 target, the range was enormous. Because the energy's in the target and the energy's in us as well. So add about Mach 2.5 on top of that for the missile peak speed, and you've got a really big launch success zone. So, but it wasn't usually very big launch success zone compared to others. So it was quite nice to go back to the F3 in the 2000s and have AMRAAM on board.
Yeah, I can imagine. Big leap forward.
Yeah.